Coming up today in a special address to the nation, President Park Geunhye vows the strongest diplomatic efforts for a UN resolution sanctioning North Korea for its recent nuclear test. She also speaks at length on the economy. The US House of Representatives overwhelmingly approves legislation that seeks to punish North Korea for its latest nuclear test by expanding US sanctions on the regime. Plus, South Korea's unemployment rate edged up to 3.2% in December as fewer people found work in the farming sector. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 13th of January. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. And we start this afternoon with President Park Geun-hye's special address to the nation. This comes amid heightened inter-Korean tension following North Korea's fourth nuclear test. That was announced pretty much exactly 1 week ago. She also took questions on a range of topics from reporters following her address, a Q&A session which has just ended, in fact. We're going to go straight over to our presidential office correspondent, Song Ji-sun, who is joining us on the line from Cheongwade. Ji-sun.
Mark, she made some very strong statements, saying that security and economy are the two pillars supporting a nation. She said the two are both at stake at the moment, with North nuclear threat and a standstill at the National Assembly, where it has yet to pass multiple bills aimed at revitalizing the economy, with lawmakers failing to reach an agreement on electoral map for April's general election. Park said Pyongyang's latest nuclear test has the potential to reshape the regional security landscape in Northeast Asia, and that the nature of North Korea's nuclear capabilities could change with the latest H-bomb test held last Wednesday. She reassured that Seoul and Washington will closely cooperate towards imposing a strong and the most comprehensive sanctions on Pyongyang at the UN Security Council, and that the two allies will do all they can to obtain that consensus from the international community. Park also directly called on Beijing to play its role in denuclearizing Pyongyang, saying that she believes China will take necessary actions in line with its stance towards denuclearizing Pyongyang. She also mentioned how the loudspeaker broadcasts on the border are effective in psychological warfare against North Korea, and that the truth about North's dictatorship has inspired a number of North Korean defectors to escape to the south. She then moved on to call on the parliament to work towards securing the safety of South Korean nationals. Park urged lawmakers to promptly pass anti-terrorism bills to protect the people from such threats coming from North Korea and other terror attacks. She also stressed the nation must work on creating growth engines for the next 50 years, starting with reinforcing the fundamentals of the Korean economy. To that end, labor reform bills and other economy-related bills pending at the National Assembly must be passed as soon as possible. Park noted that Moody's upgrade on the Korea's credit rating at AA2, which is the highest Seoul has ever earned, is based on its expectation that Seoul will successfully carry out reforms and restructuring, and that preemptive reforms is the only solution for stable growth and to prevent financial crisis. Mark?
Yes, it was quite interesting to hear that the majority of her special address was focused on the economy, and this was also her third press conference. You were one of the reporters in there watching the president, and she fielded a number of questions. And unlike press conferences gone by, those were held at the very start of the year. This is midway into the first month of the year. This was a special occasion, of course, given the gravity of the security situation at this time following North Korea's nuclear test. What did she have to say to the questions posed by reporters?
Right, this is the first time she held a statement. She held a press conference and addressed the nation at the same time. And the first question from the journalist was on Seoul's response to Pyongyang's nuclear test. On why Seoul could not detect the test earlier, she said both Seoul and Washington were aware that Pyongyang was capable of carrying out a nuke test at any given time, but there were no significant move or signal before the fourth test, making it difficult to predict. But she added Seoul will rev up its intel gathering capabilities on North Korea. As for whether Seoul should also possess nuclear weapons, she says Korean peninsula should be nuclear-free, as earlier promised the international community. and vessel is covered under the nuclear umbrella of the U.S. She also answered that the new sanctions on Pyongyang will be made in the way to make sure that Pyongyang changes President Communist regime with all-inclusive ways, including further financial sanctions. She once again stressed Beijing's role in doing so. And as for the latest settlement with Tokyo on Japan's wartime sexual slavery issue, she said the government has achieved the three conditions the victims were demanding: having Tokyo acknowledge its responsibility, an official and formal apology from the Japanese government, and financial compensation funded by the Japanese government. With all these three criteria met, Park said the agreement had to be made as soon as possible, with the elderly victims passing away as the years go by. On the economy, she said employment is more important than growth figures, as that's how the public gauges the economic sentiment, and that job creation will remain as her key priority in setting economic policy. I'll be back with more updates in our later newscast. Back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ji-sun, for that extremely comprehensive report, especially given the time constraints with that press conference just ending just before we came on air. Now, in related news to do with North Korea, the US has taken its first tangible action against North Korea following its latest nuclear tests, with the US House of Representatives passing legislation broadening sanctions on the regime. Geunhye Kim has the details.
The U.S. House of Representatives has voted nearly unanimously to pass legislation that seeks to punish North Korea for its latest nuclear tests by expanding sanctions on the regime. The North Korea Sanctions Enforcement Act, which aims to deny Pyongyang the hard currency it needs for its weapons program, passed Tuesday by a whopping 418-2 with bipartisan support. The bill was first introduced last year following North Korea's alleged cyber attack on Sony Pictures, but was not brought up for a vote until Pyongyang's latest provocation. Under the legislation, sanctions will be imposed on individuals or entities that assist North Korea with its nuclear weapons program. Those transferring financial assets and property to Pyongyang will also be subject to sanctions. The bill also seeks to punish individuals and organizations that have contributed to North Korea's human rights abuses and facilitated cyber attacks against the U.S. It also prohibits the North from having weapons of mass destruction, counterfeiting goods, and laundering money. Republican Ed Royce, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, said this is the most comprehensive North Korea sanctions legislation passed by the U.S. as it uses targeted financial pressure to isolate leader Kim Jong-un and his top officials from the assets they maintain in foreign banks. To become law, the legislation must be passed by the Senate and signed by the president. Geunhye Kim, Arirang News.
Now, international skepticism is growing over North Korea's proclaimed ability to perform a certain kind of ballistic missile test. North Korea monitoring website 38 North reported on Tuesday that Pyongyang's submarine-launched ballistic missile test last month was likely conducted from a submerged barge rather than a submarine, as the regime claims, citing U.S. rocket expert John Schilling. The report says the North's video, which you're watching there, shows what appears to be a support vessel some 50 to 100 meters from the launch site. Now, the report says it would be far too dangerous for a vessel to be so close to a submarine, but it would be just the right distance for a submerged barge. It added that satellite imagery of the launching site 2 days after the test showed a submersible test barge actually sitting next to a crane. The expert says North Korea has a long way to go to develop a SLBM system, and that initial operational capability is not expected before the year 2020. Now, with tensions pretty much higher than ever between the two Koreas following the North's apparent fourth nuclear test, more South Korean soldiers are deciding to extend their service to defend the country. The number of soldiers asking for service extensions has increased 5 times since August, when the two Koreas exchanged barbs over North Korea's landmine attack at the DMZ. Son Jung-in has more.
The South Korean military remains on a high state of alert due to the uptick in tension caused by North Korea's recent nuclear test. A day after North Korea claimed to have carried out a hydrogen bomb test, around 100 South Korean draftees due to finish their mandatory military service requested their discharge be delayed. Since then, more soldiers followed their lead, and by the end of last week, over 500 decided to extend their service to protect their country in a time of crisis. This is not the first example of troops deciding to stay on beyond their deadline. When North Korea's landmine attack at the demilitarized zone in August of last year seriously injured 2 South Korean soldiers, around 100 troops volunteered to have their discharge date pushed back. Officials at Seoul's defense ministry say the North's latest nuclear test seems to have aroused even greater patriotic sentiment, with an unprecedented number of soldiers applying to stay on longer. The defense ministry, which is currently reviewing the extension applications, says it will not disclose the actual number of soldiers to be granted their request, as it could place an unnecessary burden on their comrades. Under military service law, South Korea's defense minister can give permission to extend the service period of enlisted men by up to 3 months in special circumstances. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, US President Barack Obama has also been giving a national address at this time. He is currently just about finishing up his last State of the Union address that he will give before his term as president comes to an end in January 2017. Now, during the speech, Obama reflected on the achievements of his administration during his past 7 years in office and laid out a list of issues facing the nation rather than focusing on specific policy proposals. The issues addressed were around wealth inequality, climate change, the war against terrorism, and reforming US politics. He also, as you might expect, took a veiled stab at Republican presidential candidates, warning those vying for his job against exploiting people's fears of the future. Although a seat next to the First Lady was left vacant to represent the victims of gun violence, the topic was noticeably absent from the address. Now, Iran has detained 2 US Navy patrol boats with 10 sailors on board, saying they were trespassing in Iranian waters. Reuters is reporting White House officials were told by the Iranian foreign minister that the sailors in custody, 9 men and 1 woman, will be released promptly. The 2 boats were seized by naval forces of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard on Tuesday near Farsi Island in the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon said the sailors were on a routine training mission when one of the boats reportedly experienced some mechanical difficulties. Iran's semi-official Fars news agency said the Revolutionary Guard confiscated GPS equipment from the boats, which would, quote, prove that the American ships were snooping around Iranian waters. Now, how low is it going to go? That is the question experts would really love to know the answer to as oil prices continue to slide. US crude has tumbled through another psychological level, this time under $30 a barrel for the first time in 12 years, dipping during Tuesday's session. The price of West Texas Intermediate went sub 30 for the first time since December 2003, before recovering slightly to end the day at 30.41. Oil prices have now been in their worst 7-day run since the 2008 global financial crisis. Analysts say the drop is being exacerbated by lower global demand and a supply glut. Korea's export and import prices continued their downward slide for a 4th straight year, mainly due to falling oil prices. The Bank of Korea says import prices slipped 15.3% in 2015 from the year before, the biggest on-year decline since 1971. Export prices were also down 5.2% from 2014. Now, the slip is mainly attributed to low oil prices, with the benchmark West Texas Intermediate hitting a 12-year low mid-session on Tuesday, as we just heard. Now, export and import prices indices help determine trends in price changes abroad and predict their impact on the domestic front. Now, in domestic financial and economic news, Korea's youth unemployment rate rose to an all-time high last year, something President Park touched upon in her special address. The number of new jobs added in 2015 was also at a 5-year low. Now, this news casts a dark cloud over the new year and underlines the extremely tough task ahead for the new finance minister who will take office today. Geunhye has the details.
Statistics Korea says the youth unemployment rate last year came in at 9.2%. That's the highest on record since data standards were revised in 2000. The record unemployment figure comes as the nation's young people actively jumped into the labor market, even though job conditions were not looking so rosy in 2015. The economically active population of people ages 15 to 29 rose 80,000, but those in that group who found jobs last year stood at 68,000. The overall unemployment rate stood at 3.6%, the highest in 5 years. On top of that, the number of new jobs added in 2015 dropped to its lowest level since 2010. In 2014, Korea managed to add 533,000 jobs, but the figure dipped to 337,000 last year. The statistics agency says the decline last year comes from a high base effect in the previous year. It adds that the job market is showing signs of a recovery after it was hit hard by the MERS outbreak in the second quarter last year. Korea's employment rate for people in the 15 to 64 age group actually rose to its highest level on record in 2015, but that also came as more people searched for jobs as the unemployment rate rose. Geunhye, Arirang News.
Now, global automakers are pinning their hopes on luxury sedans as their success can have a huge effect on a company's profits. The latest models are being unveiled right now at this year's Detroit Auto Show. Our Kim Min-ji gives us a glimpse at some of the cars creating the buzz.
Luxury sedans are stealing the spotlight at the Detroit Auto Show as car makers vie to boost their share in the fast-growing high-end market. Hyundai Motor unveiled its G90 premium luxury sedan under its new Genesis brand, which is aimed at capturing a larger portion of the global luxury car market. Toyota made a splash with its Lexus LC500 Sports Coupe. The company hopes it will help Lexus build a better reputation as a global brand among premium car consumers. Ford Motor raised the curtain on its much-anticipated Lincoln Continental luxury sedan after a 14-year hiatus. The automaker is counting on the model to appeal to Chinese consumers, as well as help it compete with other luxury car brands.
First step is build better products. If you want to be competitive, you need to make very good product, and you have to do it for a while to get that brand image up. Now, some of the domestic manufacturers, they're already on the right track.
Automakers are hoping to lure car enthusiasts away from the three German players, BMW, Audi, and Mercedes, that account for roughly 80% of the global luxury car market. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Looks good. OK, well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and we will be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Until then, goodbye.